When entering the world of games, people can become whoever they desire, such as a young character, regardless of their real-life age. This allows them to do things they can't outside the game, which is why these games are so wonderful. The 38-year-old protagonist starts by creating his character to begin a game called One More Free Life Online. He names his avatar Earth and makes him look quite youthful, approximately his real-life age, not forgetting his black hair and eyes. In reality, he was just an ordinary salaryman who could only spare 2 or 3 hours a day for gaming. Therefore, he preferred playing alone to avoid inconveniencing other players. For this reason, he builds his character to be unattractive, even selecting so-called trash abilities. Out of the 10 abilities he chooses, 6 are quite poor, like a bow that never hits its target and the herbalist skill, which is unnecessary in the game since anyone can buy cheap potions from an NPC. He also takes his skill for an extremely weak kick, wind magic that doesn't work against fire or earth elements, and concealment, which has a high MP cost. Lastly, he takes physical skills enhancement, which can be used for running, using weapons, and crafting, but is superficial. He finalizes his character with the intention of being avoided by other players and enjoying peace. And so Earth begins playing One More Free Life Online, where the objective is simply to enjoy life. As it's not a game with a grand mission like defeating the Demon King, players can do as they please, whether it's fighting monsters, crafting items, or just chatting with others, living a carefree life. He starts in a bustling area where a girl named Mian offers to sell him some equipment. However, Earth suddenly collides with a troublemaker player wearing golden armor and accompanied by a group of Mohawks. He mocks Earth for using a useless bow and kicks him, acting quite unnecessarily before leaving. Subsequently, Earth continues to the training center, where he decides to hone his archery skills. However, the bow is so terrible that even after multiple attempts, he doesn't come close to hitting the target. But after shooting about 100 arrows, he finally begins to make progress, hitting the target and reaching level 5 in that skill. Next, Earth trains his wind magic and his kick, and after learning the minimum he needs, he heads out to the field. But upon arriving, he encounters chaos and thinks it's better to focus on collecting herbs for now. So Earth sets out in search of his collection, using his distance vision to locate some of the herbs. However, he realizes he can't analyze them right away. It doesn't take him long to raise his herbalist skill to level 3, allowing him to see the categories of each plant. With this, he can analyze their functions, discovering that he had collected 2 herbs that momentarily stopped breathing, wondering why the game placed them in an initial area. Afterward, Earth buys a beginner's potion production set at the potion shop to make a healing potion. He follows all the necessary steps, obtaining the item he wanted. In that game, after producing the item, you could choose the option to produce in bulk, making several items at once. Then he makes an antidote as well, raising the herbalist skill to level 7. With the healing potion and antidote ready, he returns to the field for his first hunt, glad to see the place had finally emptied. Suddenly, Earth spots a horned rabbit. He concentrates to hit the small creature on the first try since he couldn't shoot in sequence with his bow. However, the rabbit senses his presence, dodges the arrow, and attacks Earth. The boy then launches another arrow, hitting the animal's leg, but this only makes the rabbit angrier. With no other choice, Earth gives up on his bow and uses his kicking ability to protect himself. After kicking the rabbit twice, he finally manages to successfully finish his first hunt, obtaining the monster's skin and meat. He thinks that this way he'll end up becoming an expert in kicking rather than archery, when he's startled by 2 players who had witnessed his hunt. They introduce themselves as Zwei and Millie and add Earth to their friend list. Later, Earth continues his hunting to gain more experience and reduce the time it takes to defeat a monster. He locates another horned rabbit, but just like the previous one, it notices his presence and flees, forcing Earth to give up on using his bow and try another skill, using his wind magic to hit the monster. He thinks of a way to hide his presence, remembering he had the concealment ability. So by activating this skill, Earth finally manages to hunt with his bow, surprised at how well that combination worked. However, despite wanting to play all night, it was already late in the day, and he needed to get some rest for work the next day. And so after working, Earth returns to the game. He buys a piece of bread from an NPC, but it tastes bad. Since he can taste the game's food, Earth decides to cook something more appetizing. He cooks a horned rabbit meat, but it turns out extremely tough. Therefore, he prepares another piece of meat, testing a different way to cook the dish, which turns out much better than the previous one. Then Earth continues cooking to further improve his culinary skill in the game until he makes a dish with such a delicious aroma that it attracts several players who are nearby. Before he knows it, Earth realizes there is a crowd willing to pay a good price for a plate of steak, shelling out 20 times what he paid for a piece of bread. However, people were hungry and impatient, leaving Earth desperate to cook as many dishes as possible, until after cooking several times, he reaches level 20 in that skill, gaining the power of fast cooking. With this, he manages to quickly fulfill orders until that nightmare is over. Later, he decides to make a better bow to use in his hunts since there was no demand for that type of weapon, and he had to create one himself. After some time chopping wood and more, Earth finally finishes his new bow, which, while still a weak weapon against monsters, was better than the beginner's bow he had. However, he decides to experiment with strengthening the bow using more wood, making the weapon slightly more potent. Satisfied with his work, Earth goes to buy some armor. He then analyzes the levels of each skill, seeing that he was already at level 25 in cooking. Suddenly, he remembers that he had just spent most of his money to buy the armor. So to recoup that money, he decides to use the game's vending machines to try selling grape-flavor healing potions to see if players would like them. Later, he heads out to the field to hunt some monsters, and while analyzing the ones nearby, he chooses the nearest wolf. After activating concealment, he shoots with his bow. Earth then proceeds to his next hunt, training his kick and wind magic as well. He defeats several monsters, acquiring various types of items and increasing the levels of his 3 attacks. However, after hunting so much, he runs out of arrows and decides to call it a day. When he returns, he sees that some players had already gone to the vending machine and bought his grape potion, with some comments expressing their approval and requesting more, which makes Earth quite happy. But when he arrives in town, he is confronted with a desperate crowd in search of healing potions. This puzzles Earth as they could buy as many potions as they wanted from the NPCs. To understand what was happening, he calls Zwei. Earth tells him that when he returned from hunting, all the players in town were searching for potions. Zwei explains that not long ago, the NPCs announced that the potions had run out, causing everyone to frantically search for more. Zwei then warns that this situation will likely fall on Earth as he had just sold potion juice. Only at that moment does Earth realize that his friend was right, as he was already surrounded by players eager to buy some of his potion. Earth tries to calm the people down by explaining that since there are so many of them, he'll have to set a purchase limit for each player, allowing each to take 5 potions. Everyone is thrilled with the number, but impatient ones quickly appear, urging Earth. Fortunately, Zwei and Millie step in to help, with him organizing the people while she handles the accounting. This leaves Earth to focus solely on production. Since very few players had the herbalist skill, which allowed them to make potions as it had been considered a useless skill, until that moment, Earth is quite overwhelmed, working tirelessly to avoid player disputes over the lack of potions. He activates the mass production capability, but after a long time making potions, his medicinal herbs run out. So he informs the players that he can only sell the remaining potions, which won't be enough for everyone. People understand the situation and ask Earth to make more potions the next day. But at that moment, the troublemaker player appears, accompanied by his group of Mohawks, and demands that Earth hand over all the healing potions to him. Earth explains that the few remaining potions were for the people waiting in line, but the player is not willing to accept no for an answer. Zwei tries to maintain order, but the guy punches him, causing him to fall to the ground, making it clear what would happen if Earth opposed him. However, Earth shows that the guy's attitude was annoying the other players. He then offers to pay for the potions, but Earth says that's not the problem, as cutting in line would make him unpopular with other players, including the producers, which would certainly hinder his ability to buy essential in-game items like weapons and armor. Therefore, it's crucial to maintain a good relationship with other players. Instead of listening to Earth's advice, the guy challenges him to a duel to prove he's superior to a mere archer. Zwei tells Earth not to accept the challenge, but he's not willing to run away from the fight and let an aggressive player like that come out on top. So Earth accepts the duel and decides to take advantage of the player's confidence to spot his weaknesses. As soon as the fight begins, the player attacks with his sword, but Earth dodges the blow and launches a kick, followed by 2 arrows, ending the duel rather quickly. Immediately, his friends flee with the unconscious player, and everyone celebrates Earth's victory. Seeing his potential, Zwei and Millie decide to invite Earth to join their group. Then, after notifying all the players that he will continue to make potions the next day, Earth logs out of the game. He thinks about how the group of Mohawks should be shunned by production players due to their unnecessary attitude. As soon as he leaves his room, Zwei sends him a message, asking if Earth is interested in forming a group. A few days after the incident with the lack of potions, the herbalist skill was revived in the game. After all, it had become a useful skill due to the item limit imposed on NPC sales. And so the protagonist started the game as usual, but this would be the first day that Earth would be part of a group in that world, joining Zwei's team called Blue. Since Earth only knew Zwei and Millie from the group, the other members introduced themselves to him. One of them was a girl named Nora, who claimed to be skilled in melee combat due to her sword. Next, he met Rage, a tank wielding an axe and shield responsible for drawing enemy attacks. Finally, Earth met Casimine, a one-handed swordsman. After getting to know everyone, Earth began to introduce himself. However, everyone already knew he was an archer, and Zwei explained that he had become quite famous among players after winning the duel against the Mohawk guy. So he skipped the introductions but asked if the group was indeed balanced since they had 4 frontline members, Millie as a magic user and himself as an archer. The group explained that Millie could use magic with various attributes including damage dealing, and that Nora could also use healing magic, providing support during melee combat. They explained that they were determined to hunt a wild bear, even though it was a very tough enemy in the game. Earth couldn't help but wonder where all this confidence came from. He mentioned it would be his first time hunting a bear and expressed his concerns, as the bear was known to be fast and intelligent. But no one seemed willing to back down from the challenge, agreeing to go for the hunt and then enjoy a delicious meal prepared by Earth. And so the archer participated in his first team hunt. He used his long-range vision to analyze the nearby enemies, noticing that all the wild bears were traveling in groups. Eventually, he found one that was alone. With the target located, they decided to lure the bear to a more advantageous location for their fight. The blue team recognized that Earth had just joined, that he was already being helpful. Millie cast a spell on Zwei, and Earth explained that he would move away to use his concealment skill. They sprang into action, with Earth firing his first arrow. However, this only enraged the wild bear. Rage performed his role, drawing the enemy's attention. In the game's battle mechanics, there was a hidden parameter called Hate, where the monster demonstrated its anger and rage. A high defense tank attracted all the hate to protect the other players. While Earth moved to a safe distance to keep the creature in his sights, Rage still took some damage from the bear, as it was a formidable foe. However, Millie promptly aided him with her healing magic. Nora asked him to keep the bear's attention on her for attacking, but they soon realized that the monster's hide was tough and resistant to their weapons. Even Nora and the others found it challenging to pierce through. Millie's magic finally dealt some damage to the creature. The battle continued, with Rage maintaining the bear's focus on him, while Nora provided healing support to mitigate the damage. However, the group started to realize that they might have rushed into confronting such a powerful enemy. Their weapons had limited effect on the bear, and Nora was running low on MP for healing. Earth understood that the team needed a quick and precise decision. He decided to trust his 38 years of life experience and aim for the bear's forehead, hoping it might be a weak spot, determined to help his team. Earth's arrow hit the bear, but it only made the bear angrier, and they all began to worry that they might not survive this hunt. However, Earth hoped that the arrow had failed because it was too shallow and decided to use his last resort. He activated a spell he acquired at level 15 of wind magic, needing to act quickly since it only lasts for 10 seconds. With this, Earth significantly increases his speed, intensifying his kicking power to push the arrow and pierce the bear's forehead. Next, Zwei shouts for Millie to attack, and she once again casts her magic, allowing the team to finally succeed in that hunt and put an end to the wild bear. Zwei apologizes for suggesting they go after a wild bear, acknowledging that it wasn't a good decision. However, Earth says that everything turned out well, and now it's time for them to enjoy the new dish he prepared, which excites them all. And so, they all enjoy a wolf skewer, savoring the seasonings that Earth used to prepare the meal. Zwei wonders why he's the only one not given a skewer, having to settle for a mere piece of bread. After teasing his friend for a bit, Earth finally admits he was just joking, giving Zwei a skewer and making him very happy. He savors the meat, enamored with the taste, and Nora asks Earth if the recipe for the food is expensive. He explains that in reality there's no way to obtain recipes through exchange because it's become a secret understanding among producers not to sell recipes. He mentions that first of all, it takes a lot of money and time to create a recipe, and secondly, even with a recipe, the result of the food can vary because it depends on the effort and ingenuity of the person who made it. For these reasons, the game's producers concluded that it's impossible to imitate the quality of other players' production. So since they can't buy Earth's meat skewer recipe, Zwei suggests they pay a low price for him to cook for their team, which irritates Earth as it's not right to place a value on someone else's work, but it makes the rest of the team very happy. At the end of the day, Earth adds the other members of the group as friends and continues the rest of his journey alone, hunting other enemies and expanding the game's area by heading to the forest of the 5th area. There, he encounters new monsters like giant insects. He tries to hit one of them with his bow but ends up missing and hitting an ant instead, leaving it agitated. This is a swift ant with a connection ability, and quickly, it calls his fellow ants. Even though he's in trouble, Earth decides to fight using his kicks. However, he discovers that these insects have a retaliation damage effect, which makes his body numb. After receiving a lot of attacks from the ants, Earth ends up dying and is automatically transported back to the city. Upon arriving there, he receives a game notification informing all players that they will soon have a major update called the Fairy Dance, which will introduce new skills and arts, expand production possibilities, and give each player a fairy to assist in battles and other tasks. Earth realizes it's not a good time to receive a death penalty, as soon everyone will be leveling up with this update. He trains hard to acquire the blacksmithing skill, which will allow him to improve his attacks and craft a more efficient arrow against the swift ant. After some work, Earth manages to create an iron arrow with a triangular shape, with an attack power of 6, and after a few adjustments, he finalizes it with an apple-shaped tip, increasing the arrow's attack power to 8. Next, he decides to create equipment to enhance his kicking power because besides being a weak attack, it's not effective against enemies that can deal retaliation damage. After some thought, Earth decides to add spikes to the soles of his shoes and blades on the sides. As he works on his new gear, another player named Black asks what he's doing. After some time, both of them see the final result, and Black admits he's never seen a kick assist item like that. Other players also admire the creative shoe weapon. Then Earth goes to buy a bowstring from Myun, who finds his new shoes rather eerie for a cook. Afterward, he searches for a new bow, aiming to upgrade it now that he's reached level 30 in that skill. He evaluates his 3 options, first considering the short bow, which is easy to use but has limited range, which he dismisses as he's not good in close-range fights. Then he looks at the long bow, which offers more range and power but takes a long time to draw, which isn't suitable for solo play. This leaves Earth with the hunting bow, which has good size and shooting range. He specializes in this advanced skill, reaching level 1. With everything prepared, Earth names his new weapon the Hunting Composite Bow X, and when he tests it, he notices the improvement in his weapon, bidding farewell to the old one, which despite being inferior to the current one, had been useful to him until that point. Now that he has improved, he goes in search of a swift ant. Combining wind magic with the bow, he defeats the enemy with 2 shots. He continues hunting more insects, getting his revenge and collecting plenty of ant exoskeletons, which can be used to create lightweight armor. He takes the material to Myun, who is an armor craftswoman. Then the game announces that the fairy dance is about to begin, and the first part of that stage is each player receiving an auxiliary fairy. Earth receives his contract crystal, which contains his fairy. He hopes to get a wind-based one to complement his abilities. However, when he begins the ritual, the crystal shatters and no fairy appears, leaving him frustrated. At that moment, he receives a call from Zwei, asking him to meet up with the group. When he arrives, he shows the result of his crystal and asks if this happened to Zwei, but Zwei shows he has his fairy, as does everyone else, each of them having received a little companion. In other words, Earth is the only one without a fairy. To lift his spirits, Millie tells him not to give up as they're only in the first part of the mission. And since his crystal hasn't disappeared, there must be another chance for him to make the contract. She believes that there's probably something in the second part of the mission, which encourages Earth to remain hopeful. However, they don't understand why their fairies liked him so much and are a bit jealous of it. Earth finds them all very cute and hopes he can get his own fairies soon. A few days later, Earth continued to attract the fairies to him even without having his own fairy, as his contract crystal had broken. He played with one of the fairies and after a while decided to take a look at his profile. There, he saw that his skills had improved, now allowing him to acquire superior abilities for even more ways to fight. Next, Earth embarked on his first dungeon exploration. He walked through the darkness of the cave, reminiscing about exploring places like that when he was a child, having fun knowing he could relive this experience thanks to the game. However, now it was even more thrilling. Suddenly, in a darker section, Earth encountered a giant spider. He shot an arrow at the creature and then unleashed several wind magic attacks, but the spider resisted. He then attempted to strike but accidentally hit his head on the cave ceiling. Nevertheless, he recovered quickly and snared the spider with a rope and delivered a kick, managing to defeat it. He celebrated the victory, though his head still throbbed from the impact. At that moment, several dark fairies appeared and Earth realized they wanted him to follow them. So Earth followed the fairies using a new ability called Gravity Center Stabilization, allowing him to traverse the path without stumbling. Later, he realized he had finally arrived at the place they desired as all the fairies were gathered in one spot. Upon looking where they were, Earth moved a stone that was in the way, revealing a secret door with a chest behind it. He was excited to be in the exploration phase of the game and, upon opening the chest, found an ancient ring. Despite not knowing its purpose, Earth decided to keep it. He thanked the fairies for helping him find the item just as he received a game notification announcing the second part of the fairy dance would finally be revealed. Earth headed to the city, where the game announced that the name of this second part of the event was Battle with the Fairies. After participating in battles and PvP fights, fairies would be able to evolve and take on new forms. The game emphasized that this would only happen if players battled with different people, providing an excellent opportunity for them to get to know other players. Additionally, the top 16 in the PvP would be invited to the tournament, with special prizes for the winners. Another update included titles and distinctions that players would receive based on their gameplay style. The game also informed players like Earth who hadn't acquired fairies could restore their contract crystals through special PvP, not only guaranteeing success, but also offering a higher chance of obtaining a rare fairy. The game also stated that from now on, fairies would have self-identity, leading to changes in their behavior. After the announcement, all players began discussing the news as there were many changes to digest. Earth noticed that players were excited about the changes, but he feared that players might start bothering the artisans who didn't enjoy PvP. However, later he met Black, who explained that it wouldn't be a problem for them as all the artisans agreed that any player who bothered them or tried to force a fight should be reported to everyone. In other words, it would be left in peace because no player was foolish enough to become an enemy of an entire guild. Black then asked Earth if he had visited the newly discovered city. The city was named Nexia and had a teleportation portal, so players could come and go as they pleased. Black explained that serious PvP players were gathering there to battle, and Earth asked if Black would participate. However, he replied that being an artisan suited him better, and he would leave the fighting to other players. Earth realized that there were indeed many ways to enjoy an event like this and contemplated how he would make the most of it. The next day, Earth decided to check the additional titles he had received. This caught the attention of other players as they were all expecting Earth to receive a rare title. He discovered he had been awarded the title Fairy Charmer, which made all the fairies love him, explaining a lot. Earth didn't particularly like his title because it drew a lot of attention, but he could only remove it by participating in a special PvP during the event. Because of this, Earth asked if anyone would be willing to fight him. A girl named Rona heard his request and sent him a fight invitation. She had heard of Earth before because she was also part of the blue group Zwei's guild. Rona mentioned that she had always wanted to talk to him as he fought with kicks and she was skilled in martial arts. Earth thanked Rona for agreeing to fight him, but suddenly his fairy, a bird, flew to his shoulder. Rona found this strange because the bird was usually very timid. However, it had taken such a liking to Earth that it refused to fight him, proving to everyone that he was indeed a fairy charmer. This made Rona jealous as her fairy had never shown any affection to her and had already warmed up to Earth, while he became even more desperate to fight someone. Unfortunately, this situation repeated itself several times, with all the fairies refusing to battle him. Later, Rona called Earth to ask for a favor, and Earth quickly guessed what she wanted. The girl wanted Earth to cook something for her fairy to eat because it wasn't eating properly, just like the fairies of dozens of other players who wanted the same. It all began when Earth met a player who had trouble feeding his fairy with the bread sold by NPCs, as the bread was genuinely bad. The player asked him to cook something for his fairy, as if Earth could make something as delicious as his steak. He could also cook tasty food for the fairies. Because Earth agreed to help, the news spread, and now he had to cook for a line of people, even limiting them to 3 cakes each. After some time, his service slowed down and he managed to complete all the orders, thanks to Rona, who helped by finding other cooks to prepare fairy food. She then asked Earth what he was planning to do now that his service had finished, and Earth replied that he had been cooking for a long time, so he wanted to do something different. Rona invited Earth to go to the new city with her. The two of them used the portal to quickly reach Nexia, where they immediately saw an area where PvP battles were taking place and decided to watch. One of the players in the battle had a bird fairy like Rona, while the other had a wolf. Earth and Rona noticed that the wolf was behaving strangely. As the battle began, the two players faced off, but when the owner of the wolf fairy asked it to attack, the creature refused to obey. Taking advantage of this, the opponent attacked with the help of his fairy and won the battle. Earth then understood what was happening. He explained to Rona that the wolf player was a fairy abuser, which is what players were calling those who use fairies abusively, such as hitting or speaking rudely to them, causing them to stop following commands. The player became quite angry with the wolf, shouting aggressively at it. Earth thought the situation would escalate because he recalled a video he had seen where a fairy abuser had mistreated his fairy so much that, as a penalty, she evolved drastically and the game forced a battle between them, after which the player lost his contract with the fairy. However, the wolf player managed to control his anger, and Earth deduced that he knew what would happen if he lost his temper. Rona said she didn't know anything about this. Earth explained that penalties like this were common in older games, and even though modern games were gentler with players, this one opted for a more old-school approach. Earth thought he had played enough for the day and said goodbye to Rona. The girl thanked him again for the food for her fairy. After bidding her farewell, he disconnected from the game. He thought about how some players took great care of their fairies like Rona, while others, for some reason, chose to treat them violently. However, it was a matter of personal choice. But when Earth returned to the game the next day, he was surprised because the player with the wolf fairy appeared to seek his help, given Earth's title as a fairy charmer. He asked for advice on how to reconcile with the wolf since Earth had seen the video of the player attacked by his fairy after she reached her limit, and he didn't want the same to happen to him. While the wolf licked his face, Earth asked why the player had treated him poorly. The player explained that he didn't know how to behave with fairies and had watched videos of other players. However, all the videos showed them treating fairies like circus animals. So he thought he had to follow the same path as those players, but realized his mistake when the second phase of the update brought about a change in fairy behavior. He revealed that after that, the fairy stopped listening to him, and in an attempt to regain her obedience, he ended up hitting her several times, which only made the situation worse. The player admitted that he shouldn't have acted that way and pleaded with Earth to help him find a solution, even offering to pay for his assistance. However, Earth said he didn't want anything in return to avoid making it a habit. Earth told the player that he just had to treat his fairy well, taking care of her like a friend, and advised him to do everything together with his fairy, including resting, eating, and fighting, always thanking her for her assistance. He said that when the player started taking care of his fairy, she would become obedient again. Then the player remembered that Earth was a cook who made fairy food and asked him to make something for his wolf to win the fairy over with food. Earth agreed to help. Earth prepared some horned rabbit Kara-age for the wolf. Once it was ready, the player took one and approached his fairy with trepidation as she wasn't pleased with him at all. However, after sniffing the snack for a while, the fairy decided to eat it, giving the player an opportunity to get closer. As a result, the fairy began to trust him again, and the player was moved to have finally won back his fairy. He thanked Earth for his help. The boy was happy to have assisted and started to accept his title better. However, as he bid them farewell, a man named Silver called out to Earth. He introduced himself as Silver and asked to talk to him privately, away from prying ears. During the night, Earth decides to visit an isolated cabin to have a private conversation with Silver. Earth notices that all of Silver's equipment is top-notch and concludes that he must be one of the best-ranked players currently and a hardcore gamer who invests many hours in the game. Silver then sits down and tells Earth he'll be straightforward, asking if he has seen a man named Glad. Earth thinks for a few seconds but says he hasn't seen anyone by that name. Silver relaxes a bit and says that Glad would be after the player who holds the title of Fairy Enthrallor, a title that Earth possesses. Earth then asks Silver who this Glad is, and Silver responds that he used to be a permanent member of his group, a player with behavior issues, but because he was a highly skilled tank, he had a spot in the group. Earth recognizes that if Silver is talking about this in the past tense, it means Glad is no longer part of the group. Silver explains that Glad became too arrogant and started belittling other players. But things got worse at the start of the fairy event, as Glad was the only one in his group who couldn't make a contract with a fairy, just like Earth. This led Glad to become frustrated and vent his anger on everyone, and as Silver was the group leader, his only choice was to banish Glad. Silver then summons his fairy to continue the conversation. He made a contract with a Valkyrie of Light fairy who is extremely strong and had a perfect humanoid form. Silver continues the story saying that everything he tried to do to console Glad only made him angrier until finally in the last game update, Glad obtained another crystal, allowing him to make a contract with a fairy known as the Dark Fox. Since then, Glad has been challenging various players to special PvP matches whenever he can. Earth realizes that even with a fairy, Glad still feels humiliated, and that's why he's doing this. Silver agrees, saying that Glad probably wants to demonstrate his power in the championship that will take place on the last day of the fairy event, warning Earth once again to be careful not to get involved with him. Earth thanks Silver for the warning, and Silver says he'll have to deal with Glad during the championship. Silver leaves with his fairy, leaving Earth thinking that it's dangerous to believe a story when you only know one side of it, but he decides it's better to be cautious. He then decides to go monster hunting because this way he can continue playing safely. In the game's terms, it's against the rules for one player to challenge another to a PvP match while the other player is fighting monsters. So even if Glad is really after him, Earth can stay safe by hunting monsters. He uses his bow to shoot an arrow in the forehead of a wild bear, but it doesn't bring the animal down immediately, only making it angry. As the bear charges toward Earth, he decides to use his new technique called Mirror Arrow, which allows him to create 2 copies of himself, making all 3 shoot simultaneously, effectively delivering 3 attacks at once. However, the bear remains alive, prompting Earth to use his whip to entangle its legs and pull it to the ground. Earth then finishes off the opponent with a powerful kick. After the fight, he realizes how challenging it is to take down a bear alone, but he decides to continue with this strategy. Earth earns enough points to improve his skills and decides to enhance his kick, learning a new technique called Sliding Charge, which allows him to strike the enemy with a charge or quickly escape danger. This is his first kicking technique. Next, Earth decides to search for minerals in the mines near the Nexia region to gather high-quality materials for making steel or lightweight metal to improve his equipment. During his mining work, he accidentally hits an explosive ore nugget. He quickly warns those nearby to take cover, while carefully storing the explosive metal. After resolving the issue, Earth apologizes to the other players who thank him for alerting them and preventing a massive explosion that could have caused significant damage. With the ores in hand, Earth goes to Black and asks to borrow his forge. He spends the entire night crafting a twisted arrowhead from the bear leather he acquired. After many hours of work, he finally creates an arrowhead that can cause bleeding when it hits the target. With the remaining metal, he decides to make a flexible steel whip that can also inflict bleeding effects. The next day, Earth goes to the processing room basement, where he conducts experiments with the explosive ore he found, even though it involves a field of knowledge that is not his expertise. However, he feels safe in that room, knowing that he won't risk anyone's life if something goes wrong. This allows him to experiment freely using his herbalism skill. In the end, Earth manages to create 3 mixtures, A, B, and C. He then goes to a remote area to test the strength of the explosions, tossing the first vial with mixture A, which breaks on the ground without causing any significant explosion. Earth then throws the vial with mixture B, and it results in a massive explosion, destroying a considerable area and depleting 80% of Earth's health. He decides to keep this mixture for extreme situations when he might need to sacrifice himself to defeat a monster and names it Infernal Mine Oil. Due to the damage he sustains, Earth needs to consume a healing potion. He proceeds to throw the last vial with mixture C, which causes a mild explosion, exactly what Earth was looking for. He names this mixture Fortified Oil. Next, Earth heads to the field to test his new mixture. There, he encounters a group of 3 wild bears. He begins the battle by using the fortified oil on the creatures, and then attacks with his arrows, wind magic, and steel whip. This makes the battle much easier, allowing him to defeat the 3 bears quickly and effectively. However, Earth acknowledges that he shouldn't rely on consumable items too much, as it won't improve his skills. He reaches level 50, the Hunting Bow and Wind Magic, gaining 2 new abilities, Gatling Arrow and Fly. These abilities unlock another secret skill called Wind Bow, which combines the skills of the Bow and Wind Magic. Choosing this skill would prevent Earth from acquiring advanced skills in both Hunting Bow and Wind Magic, but he decides to take this new skill. Later, Earth tests his 2 new abilities and finds that Gatling Arrow allows him to shoot in rapid succession. Although he can only fire twice in his current level, Fly enables him to use wind support magic, allowing him to jump high. Afterward, Earth takes his hunting materials to the city and orders a cloak made from the bear leather he acquired. Suddenly, an announcement for players is displayed stating that the PvP Championship for the Fairy event has selected its participants based on score calculations. At this moment, Sway and Millie appear and comment that none of them in their group likely made it to the top 16 participants, as none of them focused much on PvP battles. The game provides the list of selected players, and the 3 realize that 2 players stood out for their numerous victories, Silver and Glad. Earth is concerned about the relationship between the 2, but is also eager to watch them fight. Several players gather at the championship server to watch the battles. From the arena stands, Earth, Zwei, and Millie eagerly await the matches. Earth uses his special vision skill and spots 2 other players with the same Fairy Enthraller title, which eases his mind, knowing he's not the only one with that title. The battles begin, and Earth notices that the winning fairies are absorbing the energy of the defeated ones, something that doesn't occur in regular PvP battles. Finally, the highly anticipated moment of the final battle arrives. Silver and Glad step into the arena to face each other. Earth, who had anticipated the showdown, watches with keen interest. Inside the ring, Silver tells Glad that he felt the need to correct him for his mistakes, and the only way to do that was by defeating him. Glad doesn't back down, but instead becomes excited and prepares to fight. The battle commences, and Silver quickly advances with his axe toward Glad, who responds by saying he was already familiar with Silver's tactics. Thanks to the numerous times he had watched Silver fight, he knew that Silver's strategy was to charge at the enemy with his axe to try to destabilize his opponent. However, the trick doesn't work, and Glad counterattacks, while his Dark Fox Fairy battles Silver's Valkyrie of Light Fairy on equal footing. Silver sees an opening and attempts to strike Glad with his Moon Crescent move, but Glad swiftly slides backward using Wind Boost, the wind magic skill, surprising Earth because he didn't know that Glad was a wind magic user. Glad takes advantage of Silver being airborne due to the missed attack and delivers a powerful blow followed by a strong attack from his Dark Fox Fairy, ultimately making Glad the champion of the competition. By absorbing the energy of Silver's Valkyrie, the Dark Fox evolves into a humanoid fox. She explains that the purpose of the event was to select the next fairy ruler. The fairies received a prophecy that the king must be strong and understand the art of war, something that wasn't a common trait among fairies, as they are peaceful creatures. So they joined forces with humans who are masters of warfare to gain that experience, allowing the fox fairy to acquire the necessary knowledge to become the ruler. Glad asks if she will discard him now that she no longer needs him. She replies that the other fairies won't distance themselves from him, but she will, as their contract is now over. Since all Glad wanted was to use the fairy as a tool for revenge, she used him to win the championship. However, she offers Glad a reward of money and a bonus, as well as the opportunity to contract with a fairy as strong as she was before evolving. Glad declines the proposal and challenges the fox fairy to a fight. She accepts, saying that if he wins, she will obey him again, but if he loses, he won't receive the money or the bonus. They begin the battle, but Glad quickly gets pummeled, proving that the fox is now on a level far above what he can handle. After winning, the fox fairy states that 3 people deserve a reward, bringing Earth and the other 2 players with the same title as him to her. She explains that the 2 others were the only ones who refused to fight using their fairies. As a reward, she allows their fairies to evolve. For Earth, who didn't have a fairy, she presents a different offer. She tells him he can fight her once, leaving Earth entirely confused about whether he liked his reward or not.